Ancient Greece.
Phoenicians. Modern propaganda is founded on the idea that Western secular democracy represents the culmination of centuries of human intellectual evolution, which began in ancient Greece. We are led to believe that Greek philosophy began our empiricist tradition, as the pursuit of objective truth, free of superstitions such as belief in the supernatural. Nothing could be further from the truth. F. M. Cornford, in From Religion to Philosophy, has set out to dispel the myth that Greek philosophy marked the birth of speculative thought, demonstrating that there was no radical break between the age of religion and the age of philosophy. Essentially, it represented contrived rationalizations formulated in an attempt to garner legitimacy for preconceived religious ideas. As Cornford points out, the work of philosophy thus appears as the elucidation and clarifying of religious, or even pre-religious material. It does not create its new conceptual tools, it rather discovers them by ever subtler analysis and closer definition of the elements confused in its original datum. More specifically, as Cornford pointed out, the theology that became the substance of Greek philosophy was not the worship of the pantheon inherited from archaic times, but an entirely other creed, intended to topple the old belief system, the newly adopted teachings of the Chaldean Magi. Contrary to popular assumptions, Greece was fundamentally a Middle Eastern civilization. According to M. L. West, though a number of foreign elements were derived from other parts of the Near East, in archaic times, it was the Semitic West specifically, composed of the land of the Canaanites and the Jews, which exercised the greatest degree of influence on Greek culture. As demonstrated in The Orientalizing Revolution, by Professor Walter Burkert, recognized as perhaps the foremost scholar of Greek religion, the emergence from the Dark Age was brought about through cultural contact with Phoenicians, who were effectively indistinguishable from the Israelites. Through intermarriage and a shared language and pagan cult. The Phoenician influence on ancient Greece was such that in the east face of Helicon, West Asiatic elements in Greek poetry and myth, M. L. West, remarks that, Near Eastern influence cannot be put down as a marginal phenomenon to be invoked occasionally in explanation of isolated peculiarities.
It was pervasive at many levels and at most times. 2. Burkert states that the impact on Greek art in this period is evident in imported objects as well as by new techniques and characteristic motifs of artistic imagery, though
the prejudices of modern scholars have led him to disregard the overwhelming evidence. He continues. Even expert archaeologists, however, sometimes appear to feel uncomfortable about this fact and indeed advise against using the expression, the Orientalizing period. The foreign elements remain subject to a policy of containment. There is hardly a standard textbook that has Oriental and Greek objects depicted side by side. Many of the Oriental finds in the great Greek sanctuaries have long remained, and some still remain, unpublished. 3. The most important contribution of this interaction was the adoption by the Greeks of the Phoenician script.
The Greeks did not begin to use letters for writing until about 700 BC, and only scraps have survived from before 600 BC.
The Greeks borrowed their alphabet, with only slight innovations, from a letter system that had been used equally by Hebrews, Phoenicians and Arameans. The Greeks themselves called their alphabetic letters Phoenician, which had supposedly been introduced to them by Cadmus, a Phoenician prince. According to Greek mythology, Cadmus was the son of King Agenor and Queen Telephassa of Tyre and the brother of Phoenix, Phoenician, Cilix and Europa. He was originally sent by his royal parents to seek out and escort his sister Europa back to Tyre after she was abducted from the shores of Phoenicia by Zeus. Cadmus founded the Greek city of Thebes, the Acropolis of which was originally named Cadmea in his honor. In classical times, the Greeks recognized four great divisions among themselves, each named in honor of their respective ancestors: Achaeus of the Achaeans, Danaus of the Danaans, Cadmus of the Cadmeans, the Thebans, Helen of the Hellenes, not to be confused with Helen of Troy, Aeolus of the Aeolians, Ion of the Ionians, and Doris of the Dorians. Cadmus from Phoenicia, Danaus from Egypt, and Pelops from Anatolia each gained a foothold in mainland Greece and were assimilated and Hellenized. The Greeks were known as Hellenes, through the descent from Helen, who along with her siblings, Gracchus, Magnus, and Macedon were sons of Deucalion and Pyrrha, the only people who survived the Great Flood. Sons of Helen and the nymph Orcés were Doris, Xuthos, and Aeolus. Sons of Xuthos and Creusa, daughter of Erechthea, were Ion and Achaeus. The Ionians were descended from Cadmus and Danaus, who were equated with the colonizers named Hyksos, a dynasty of foreign invaders who ruled a northern portion of Egypt, establishing themselves at a town called Abydos, but who were finally expelled by the Egyptians in 1450 BC, and eventually settled Palestine. Manetho, an Egyptian priest who lived around 250 BC, equated the Hyksos with the Jews of the Exodus. Hecataeus of Abdera, a Greek historian of the 4th century BC, set out his view of the traditions of the Egyptian expulsion of the Israelite Exodus and that of Danaus landing in Greece. The natives of the land surmised that unless they removed the foreigners, their troubles would never be resolved. At once, therefore, the aliens were driven from the country and the most outstanding and active among them banded together and, as some say, were cast ashore in Greece and certain other regions. Their leaders were notable men, among them being Danaus and Cadmus.
But the greater number were driven into what is now called Judea, which is not far from Egypt and at that time was utterly uninhabited.
The colony was headed by a man called Moses. 4. The Dorians, who were said to have invaded Greece, were also believed to have been of Phoenician origin. The colonization of the Dorians conforms with the general upheavals that involved the dispersion of the Israelites. Scholars, therefore, recognize that the invasion of the Dorians may be connected with the devastation wrought by the controversial Sea Peoples referred to in Egyptian records, who also assaulted most of Palestine, Asia Minor and Greece in the 12th century BC. The Danaans, descendants of Danaus, are usually identified with the Danaan Sea Peoples, as one of the 12 tribes of Israelites, the tribe of Dan, or the Danites. Yet, as Stager mentions in the Oxford History of the Biblical World, archaeologists agree that dramatic cultural change affected not only parts of Canaan but also much of the eastern Mediterranean at the end of the Late Bronze Age ca. 1200 BC. How much of that change was brought about by the migrations and/or invasions of newcomers to Canaan, and specifically by invading Israelites, is still an open question. 5. A number of sites counted among the conquests of the Sea Peoples are identical with those known to have been accomplished by the Israelites. As well, though such conquests are not recounted in the Bible, the Jews were also commanded to conquer all the lands of the Canaanites and their affiliated peoples, which included the Hittites known to have inhabited most of Asia Minor or modern Turkey, and perhaps as far as Greece. The Trojan War may thus have been a conflict between the ancient Israelites from the tribe of Dan, known to the Greeks as Danans, or Danaan Sea Peoples, against Hittites, the native inhabitants of Asia Minor. In the Iliad, Homer refers to the Greeks as Achaeans, who were related to the Danaans, descendants of Danaus, who was believed to be the son of Egyptian king Belus Baal.
The ancient city of Troy was located in the region known as the land of Troas, within which was also found, just several kilometers to the north, the city of Abydos, named after another city by the same name in Egypt, that had formerly been the capital of the Hyksos.
The Dorians were also known as Heraclids, being a claim, not only of descent from Hercules, but also to Phoenician ancestors. The Phoenician origin of Hercules is relatively undisputed, he being regarded as the equivalent of the Canaanite Melkite, another name for Baal. Hercules is obviously related to the Bible hero Samson, a story evidently included in the text through pagan or Kabbalistic influence. Samson and Hercules are both species of solar heroes, identified with Orion, and derived from the Babylonian figure Gilgamesh, of the famous epic, who also killed an invincible lion and accomplished other great tasks. T.W. Doane, in Bible Myths and Their Parallels in Other Religions, has brought attention to the similarities that existed between Hercules and the story of Samson in the Old Testament. The two heroes were already compared in antiquity by Eusebius, Street, Augustine and Philastrius. Samson, derived from Shamash, the Babylonian sun god, is the solar hero of the Bible, his name meaning, belonging to the sun. 6. Likewise, according to Herodotus, if we trace the ancestry of the Danae, the daughter of Acrisius, we find that the Dorian chieftains are genuine Egyptians. This is the accepted Greek version of the genealogy of the Spartan royal house. But there is no need to pursue this subject further. How it happened that Egyptians came to the Peloponnese, and what they did to make themselves kings in that part of Greece, has been chronicled by other writers. 7 in Greek mythology. The Spartoi are a mythical people who sprang up from the dragon's teeth sown by Cadmus and were believed to be the ancestors of the Theban nobility. The other half of the dragon's teeth were planted by Jason at Colchis. It may have been on this basis that, sometime around 300 BC, Arios, king of Sparta, wrote to Jerusalem, to Onias high priest, greeting. A document has come to light which shows that the Spartans and Jews are kinsmen descended alike from Abraham. 8. Both books of Maccabees of the Apocrypha mention a link between the Spartans and Jews. Maccabees 2 speaks of certain Jews having embarked to go to the Lacedaemonians, Spartans, in hope of finding protection there because of their kinship. In Maccabees 1, it has been found in writing concerning the Spartans and the Jews that they are brethren and are of the family of Abraham. 9.